In this forthcoming Shabbos Parsha of Miketz, we have the rather strange dream of Pharaoh. And if we pay attention to the very opening pasuk, we see that there is perhaps a message within it that is not only poignant insofar as the dream itself, but insofar as when we always read about the dream. And it was at the end of 2 years of Yosef's further incarceration in prison, and Pharaoh suddenly has this dream, and he is standing on the Nile River. Yet when ultimately he's introduced to Yosef via the Sar HaMashkin, and he begins to inform Yosef of the dream that he's experienced, he opens with, Vaydaber Paro Yosef b'chalami, in my dream, hineni omeid al sfas hayar. Behold, I am standing not al hayar, not on the Nile River, so much as al sfas hayar. Now, there's a very big difference between the two. Al hayar means upon the Nile River, with a sense of majesty, a sense of robustness, a sense of invincibility. Whereas al sfas hayar has the connotation of standing not on the Nile River, not lording over it, so much as standing near it on the banks of the river, somewhat as a spectator. And there's a comment in the Mayim Beis Shoeva by Rav Schwab Zecher Tzaddik Levracha that I think would explain the change in terminology. Rav Schwab asked the rather simple question. He says, I don't understand. What kind of ridiculous dream does Pharaoh have? And he's so shaken that he gathers his wise men and his khartoumim and his magicians, and he can't find anyone to properly interpret it. And he's so beleaguered and he's so troubled. And ultimately he relies upon the removal of this Nar Eved Ivri of Yosef from the bowels of the bar of the prison itself to ultimately interpret his dreams. What's going on, says Rav Schwab. He explains the Mayim Beis Shoeva. He says, we need to understand, Pharaoh's entire day-to-day life was governed by a rather simple principle of war, of governance, that most countries and most regimes buy into. And that is that whenever there would be posed a duality of opposing sides, the weaker one would always fall in to the hands of the stronger one. The few would always be delivered into the many. And it was therefore, suggests Rav Schwab, that when he's suddenly dreaming at night, and he dreams of these emaciated cows devouring those that are august in nature, when he dreams of the 7 ears of those sheaves that were wind blasted, and they're suddenly gobbling up those that were strong and healthy in nature, why then Pharaoh says to himself, he says, oh my gosh, is it possible that there is a potential rebellion afoot within my own kingdom, albeit of the few, to be lodged against the many, and the few might even win out? That's frightening. That's scary. That negates every understanding of the general principles of wars and legions. And for that reason, he was startled enough to call his khartoumim, to call his chachamim, and ultimately to rely upon the dream interpretation of this young Jewish servant removed from the prison. Because after all, it doesn't make sense that the few can ultimately conquer the many. Well, the Fizeh, and therefore, based upon this explanation suggested by Rav Schwab, he continues and says, Lo b'mikre korim Parshas Miketz b'mei Chanukah. We don't read the Parsha of Miketz during the time and celebration of Chanukah by happenstance, but rather lehoros, but rather to strike home the reminder to us, masarta giborim b'yad chaloshim, v'rabim b'yad ma'atim, to remind us that the story of Chanukah, in which the Maccabees, in which the Maccabim were victorious over the Greek Seleucid mighty legion, we need remind ourselves through the Torah Kadosha every single year that it was always that case, and it was always meant to be that way, because that was the interpretation by Yosef of the dreams of Pharaoh, that indeed he was frightened about, that indeed the Chalashim would devour those who were the Giborim, that the Ma'atim would conquer those who were in the Rov, those who were in the majority. Me'ein Chalom Paro. Indeed, the Chalom of Paro is the heralding story of Chanukah. How much we have to be grateful for, that even Paro ultimately was forced to understand that he could not be Omeid Al Hayor, but at best and at most, he can be a spectator of God's ruling the world. From where? Al Sfas Hayor, from the sidelines of history. Have a Freilich and Chanukah, a wonderful Shabbos, and remember that Paro's dreams is in essence the story of Chanukah.